Today I'm going to be removing this G-force system from this Les Paul Jr. And the idea here is to just turn it on, or hit the on button 3 times and then twice on that one, the center one. And now it's on the E, so the idea is to down tune the E. Move it to A, down tune the A, move it to D, and so on down the road to take the tuners off. And that's how we're going to start with the process of removing the strings. So we're going to take the strings off now, and an easy way to undo the top is just to take a coin of some sort and just loosen that top nut, and then you can get at the string and tighten them a bit so they don't fall off, because we're taking them right off. And again, use a coin to loosen these, and then they'll just come right off. And it's a matter of just finding that end and taking the string right off. What I'm going to do next is label all of these E, A, D, along the way, and then I'll flip it over and we'll take them off. The robotic tuners here, the G-force, have no screws underneath to hold it in place. These will come out from the top side, and then we'll be careful just to take that off too. It'd be no problem falling on this mat anyway. But its standard tuners generally have a 10 mil nut. This one appears to be a bigger, 12 mil nut. And I have labeled all of the tuners, big E, little e, the rest, along the way. So now it's just a matter of removing the tuners. And the top side is how we get to it. With this last one, I should be able to, there we go, remove the whole assembly. And there goes the A. And there you have it. I'm just going to put the tuners back in here and we'll put it away with this. But you can see kind of by the underside there's 4 little dots that correspond with those 4 little dots on the tuner, and as they go in, the aligning pin lines it up, and they will sense whatever needs to be sensed, I guess, and tell these robotic tuners to do what they need to do. So I'll just put them back in their place, and then we'll go on to installing the other regular tuners, I guess. With this guitar, we'll be also taking away this nut that the robotic system has. It has a couple of height adjusting screws there. I guess it was just held down by the strings. But that part comes off easy, and then there's a couple of screws in there. We'll get at those, and we're going to replace this with a bone nut. So let's get at that. What I'm going to do now is score this area just in case that there's finish kind of holding that together. Yeah, appears to be a bit of finish on there. So that way, if we score it off or knock it off, then we won't have any finish issues. It'll just be all scored. So let's go on with this one too. I like to score at a slight angle upwards. That way, I don't know if I can even explain this, but if we went this way, it could still score out, so you almost have to tilt the cutter this way. Or straight. But slightly tilted works good for the finish too. Let's see what happens with this. I guess I want to check. I might be in front of the camera for a second here, but I just want to check, you know, what's happening here. I think that's pretty okay. Bunch of buffing compound there. Might take a little block of maple and let's just see if we can loosen it. It appears to be moving. That seems to be going okay. I'm going to be cleaning the fingerboard now with some Gorgamite cloth. This is a product you can buy at StewMac. It's just a cloth impregnated with magic stuff that'll help clean the rosewood as well as shine up the frets. The idea is just to rub it back and forth. You'll see that you're getting some blackening of the cloth. And when you then wipe it off, you can see how shiny the frets can get. And that has also helped, you know, the fingerboard. In cutting the bone nut for this guitar, the guitar neck is really wide on these Les Paul Juniors. It's about 1 13/16, I think. But anyways, larger than the typical guitar neck, wider than the typical guitar neck. And so the string spacing on the original nut that came with this whole robotic tuning system, I measured the string spread and it was quite narrow. We don't want to put it as wide as what is usually about 1/8 of an inch from the edges, because that would be too wide of a string spacing. So I've measured my own Stratocaster, and I've measured this one, and the Strat spacing, which is still a tiny bit wider, I think will be good for this. It still won't be the same spacing at the edges as any normal guitar, but it won't be quite as wide as what was left with that, but still a comfortable spacing. So StewMac sells this ruler, I guess, that we're going to be just showing you how I'm going to mark the lines. And there is a bass and treble side, so I've already kind of determined where Mike's guitar's string spacing was, and will just be a tiny bit wider. And the idea here is to then take a sharp pencil and mark out the lines through these little slots in the ruler. So this will be the string spacing. So we'll start with tiny little slots in through the nut. This is bone that I pre-shaped earlier. Cow bone. I don't want to go too far with the little saw. It's 10,000ths of an inch wide. So I start with the smallest file and kind of widen all of those, but I keep checking all the time just to see if there's any movement. We should be pretty close there. So we'll keep on going with this. And we'll alter whatever needs to be altered a tiny bit along the way. I'll kind of push the G a tiny bit to the right and the A. So as I'm filing, I'm kind of pushing a tiny bit to the right on a couple of those. And I'll continue with bigger files. When building the nut, there's feeler gauges you can get that attach to this kind of capo-like device. And as you tighten the nut underneath it, it'll round it to the radius of the fingerboard, the shape of the fingerboard. The fret height is a 40,000ths of an inch tall fret. So one of my feeler gauges is 40,000ths of an inch, and then I put a 30,000ths as well as my first, sizing, I guess, of the nut slots. And the idea is to file basically right down to the feeler gauge, and I'm going to put the new tuners on at this point, and then we'll get back to nut building after. I'm going to be creating some plugs with this plug cutter. Is slightly tapered. I've already drilled some holes through there that are 15/64. I don't want them too big. I will ream them out with a reamer later, but the idea is to just create these little plugs. I'll show you what I'm doing. These plugs will then be used to fill the holes at the tuning pegs. So I'll continue on with those. Through maple, that cutter kind of warms up a lot, but the holes will ping those out, and the holes should be filled, and I think that'll hold those little bushings very well in place and keep the tuning more stable. So I've installed a few of these, and installed the other three. I guess I've blackened the top of these, and I just want to put a little bit of glue in there to hold it. So I just put a glue kind of in the middle here, and I'll pop that in on the other side, and the glue will grab at it, and I'll check them in a second, I guess, with the little hammer. And that is kind of it for installing these. Just a little bit of glue somewhere down the middle so it doesn't give us any grief. Push these in, lightly tap at it on a bag full of shot, and this is how I'm gonna firm up how those bushings seat in here. And if you ever needed to take these and put back the other tuners, it's just a matter of reaming it out. It won't be much. This would be harder, you know, than the other angle, I guess. So there, I've already got that one done, so these are ready to be opened up, so I'll show you how that works. I passed a reamer through these holes just to enlarge the hole a bit, so that I can just put a bit that's 1/4 of an inch right through there. That one's gripping a bit there. But these should work out good. The 1/4 inch bit is required because I'm then going to use this bushing cutter, and that fits in a 1/4 inch hole, and then we'll cut the necessary diameter for the bushings to be pressed in. Now the bushing cutter will go a good, 1/4 of an inch down. It all looks deep enough there. And the bushings should press in very, very well. There's a few chip outs in spots there, but the bushings will press in so, firmly, I guess, that it'll not be a problem at all. So we push those right in, and now they will be firmly in there. Now I'm pressing in the bushings, and they're pressing in nice and firm. Where before there was a fair bit of wiggle room in there. Those little plugs I put in, I guess, have worked out good. I'm going to be putting a bit of paraffin wax on the shaft of the tuner, and as we press them in, which is fairly firm, but that'll help just turn the tuner much better. And this shouldn't go out of tune because they're now firmly in there. So that kind of solved the problem of the mismatch of the G-force tuners to these Clouson style Gibson tuners. Historic spec. So these will look good in there. And again, that bit of paraffin, that was just to identify the treble side. And so the idea now is to line everything up. Back to the treble side. I'm going to put paraffin again on the screw treads. And snug it up firmly, but not too aggressively. More paraffin.
again, I like to see where it's going. They will be slightly askew to one another because they're following the edge of the board here, I guess, or the peg head. So we'll take the middle one and use it as a guide to figure out the other two on each side of the center, using this little scribe as a way to make a pilot hole. And then my drill with a 5/64 inch bit. I'll start the holes from here. Take this snug fitting tuner out. Not drill any deeper than the tape indicates on the drill bit. Again, I'll put some paraffin on there, just help it move, and the screws will also have paraffin, and I'll continue this way right to the top. These tuners are now in place, and I think they look great. They're the historic spec Gibson, Clouson style tuners, and that'll be a great look on this guitar. And fit in very, very well. They're not going to move now. They'll add for better tuning stability. And now onward to building the nut. When shaping a nut, you want to make sure it's nice and smooth on each end. And so there are these files that are, coarse, medium, fine, extra fine. So along the way, I make sure I measure each width at each side. This one ended up perfect. So if I can now feel it there, it helps me figure out where to file this next side to. So I just tend to push it out a bit. My finger prevents it from slipping to this side, and then I've got tape on that side that prevents it from, marring the finish of the guitar if it slips here. So it'll just be fine. Lands on that paper tape. So it's a matter of a lot of back and forth, where this one has already been measured correctly. I just feel for it with my fingernail a bit and see about that being right, and then I feel this side and there's still a little bit catching there, so I got a little bit left to do. So it's just a matter of back and forth, just pushing it at enough string tension to help hold it in place, but not enough that you can't easily push it. Yeah, that's getting really good there. So I'm not too far off my mark, just a tiny bit more. And also you can push it back into itself and check the angle that way. And my angle is really good, so I push it out and then I push it inward, and after I make sure it's lined up. So there and there. And there might be a smidge, left, but by the time I take it and sand it out, it's going to be extremely close right there. And then I'll take it to a little vise and we'll round the edges. Now we'll round off the corners of the nut. Just a matter of taking the fine and extra fine sides on this file and making a bit of a softened edge, I guess, so your hand doesn't get annoyed by any sharpness when playing. And the fine side. And along here too. And the extra fine side. Some little bit of final shaping will be done after it's glued. But for now, I'm going to use some 220 paper. Soften those edges. And then go up with subsequent grits. That's 320, this is 400. So after that, I just kind of sand it by hand. Soften up the edges, can even soften up the edge of the underside as well. 400 won't take much. The very bottom should be scuffed on about 120 because you want that glue to grab at that, and I did that earlier. So that's kind of been scuffed with 120 paper. So onward to 600 now. Just to make it nice and smooth. The smoother it is, I guess just the better it looks, really. The more professional it looks. Some 800 grit. Sand everything but the bottom, really. Don't even need to sand this side that's flush against the edge, but you could, I guess. At this point you shouldn't. It's well fitted. And then after, I like to use these polishing papers. So the pink is a 4,000, the mint is a 6,000, and then I can't remember what the other one is, but it's much higher up. Must be a 8,000. And this will polish the bone a lot. Give it a good shine, smooth feel. Again, if we do some final shaping once it's glued, I'll be using these yet again. But for now, that becomes one well-shaped bone nut. With the nut slot having been filed clean, I'm just going to put a bit of glue at the bottom of the nut. And we'll let the string tension hold it in place.
You can see it there, should be in the right zone.
Got the nut and the tuning pegs all finished up. Looking nice and shiny. Tuning pegs are all lined up. The tailpiece here had to be brought back. There's adjustment screws there to be brought back, and I actually had to notch a couple of notches in the saddle part of the tailpiece here so that the strings don't kind of shake back and forth, so they're kind of stuck in place there now. But it didn't matter so much on the big strings, they seem to stay in put, but the B and the E didn't have much string ramp, so that'll hold it in place, I guess. But yeah, there's the finished product right there, where most of the work took place in this area, but those tuning pegs should be great at this point.